The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM. The Voice. I am one of your hosts today, Jermaine Reed, and our other host. Did I say horse? Sorry. The other host is Mr. Sean Roby for Fresh Start. Our in-studio guest is the great Dr. Ben Radar from the clinic that you're with.
Sebastian Family Psychology Practice.
Sebastian Family Psychology Practice. I always say Sebastian Family Practice, Sebastian Psychological.
There's a lot of words in there.
There's a lot of words in there, but Sebastian
Family Psychology Practice.
Psychology Practice. So we're going to be talking with him. We have our in-studio engineer, Mr. Keon Malone. How you doing there, Keon? And our videographer, Mr. Tony Cash. So we have the whole team here today, and we're going to be talking about some great things I think that's related to what we see going on in the community, both in foster care, outside of foster care, just child welfare, family well-being is what we're going to be focusing on today on the show. And if at some point throughout the hour you would like to call in, you have a question, comment, or concern that is specifically related to the topic that we're discussing today, you are welcome to call 414-444-5250. 414-444-5250. Before we start talking about supporting positive discipline in homes, schools, and communities, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. For those of you who may not be aware, but June is National Men's Health Month. It's also Effective Communication Month, which I'm trying to work on communicating more effectively. Host, horse, all the breakfast, break, all those kind of things. Sometimes my tongue get tied up, but it's Effective Communication Month, and it's also National Safety. What's going on outside of the window? Do they know it's National Safety Month? Oh, my God. All right, so that's what we're talking about. Now, this day in history, back in June 1, 1843, Isabella Boomfree changed her name to Sojourner Truth and left New York to begin her career as an anti-slavery activist. Sojourner because she was planning on traveling, and Truth because she intended to preach together. The name meant itinerant preacher. Itinerant preacher. I don't know. I don't know, but Sojourner Truth. I guess she was a messenger of truth. I think I got a little Sojourner inside of me. I don't know. But also, too, in 1941, the 1st African-American Tank Battalion, the 758th, was activated. But that's your lesson in Black history on June 1st for today. So we're talking about supporting positive discipline in homes. And there's a particular, I don't know if I can call this a motto, the parenting discipline or positive discipline.
I would call it more of a paradigm, a way of looking at things.
Okay.
Because the model seems to give an idea that it's something that we're going to
step by
follow step by step, and
okay.
It's not like that. It's
okay.
a very different approach to looking at the task of child guidance.
Okay, the
really
task of child guidance, what is entailed with that. But hopefully we'll be able to, in this discussion, look at how parenting behaviors or parenting styles will influence child behavior and development.
You got it.
Okay, so that's going to be great. We're also going to be looking at the different types of parenting style, the more common ones. I'm sure depending on who you're talking to, they're probably going to say there's probably 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different type of parenting styles, but there are 4 common ones that we hear folks talk about, so we'll be sharing that with the audience and certainly want to give folks feedback because I'm not sure exactly when people are parenting that they, in their minds, know that this is the type of parent I am, or somebody has categorized or classified me as being an authoritarian. I told you the effective communication. I can't even say the word. Authoritarian.
Right.
Authoritative. See, that's why we get clean. Authoritarian, authoritative.
Yeah, they're very
permissive.
In
There's different type of parenting models and styles, so we'll be talking about that. Then we'll also be finding out, in terms of this positive discipline philosophy or paradigm that there are places in the community that's going to be teaching or educating folks about this. I want to say model. I guess being in child welfare, you just typically just say model. Everything's a model. But
Perspective.
This perspective. I like this positive discipline perspective. And we know that your agency is one of those that offer this. So we'll be talking about that. You have a special event coming up on June 9th and 10th called the Heart of the Child Guidance, Creating a Path that Invites Cooperation and Contribution with presenter Deb Hisnos.
It's actually Pisno, which is it's hard.
See,
for me
I'm
to
not
say.
saying not another
No,
word on this.
It's hard for me to say no because anytime you hear pie, I say yes. So pie's yes is probably what I'm thinking.
So
Pie's no.
Pisno. Now you know her.
That's how. Oh yeah, she's a wonderful
Okay,
person.
so Deb Pisno, P-Y-S-N-O, Pisno. And that's going to be on June 9th, 8:30 in the morning. So we'll get more information about that. But going back to this whole thing about positive discipline and parenting styles and child behavior, when we look at what's going on in the world, there was a lot of research that I came across that was showing that there is an increase in terms of the aggressive behavior that's being exhibited, defiant, violent, aggressive behavior, conduct in children who are preschool and kindergarten. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, where do you think all of that is coming from?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted problem.
question.
So you're really looking at the different sources, and I think as you're considering society going through ebbs and flows and things that change, anytime you're looking at something that's happening in the children, they are reflective of what's going on in the larger society. So children are not born in a vacuum, and oftentimes people say, well, kids these days are responding to circumstances these days. So it must be something's going on in the context in which that child is coming up. And that can be a home context, but it can also be a school context itself. It can also be the larger context of America as a context, the social fabric. So my guess is it's pointing to something that's going down somewhere, and it must be in our social fabric if we're seeing it coming out of our children.
Okay. So developmental psychologists believe there is a strong connection between parenting styles and youth and child behavior. Can you give some insight to that?
I certainly can. So the philosophy we're kind of coming from is we'll talk about an ecological framework. And what that basically means is some will say, is it nurture or is it nature that causes things? And this is an ongoing debate. From our standpoint, it's both. It's when you plant a flower in a certain garden, it needs a certain type of nourishment. It needs a certain type of care, and it'll, within some variability, it'll blossom in one way or the other. Genetics can be maybe a predisposition to some extent, but it takes the good gardener to bring out what they want in that produce, in that flower. That's what a parent is. So the role of the parent is to try to look at the child that they have that's in their under their care, and to try to draw out from them what it is that they can be, that potential.
Okay.
So that's where that relationship begins. What's your style as a parent, and what's the need of that youth?
So I'm trying to figure out if the child equates to being the seed, and within every seed there's potential for growth.
You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
The parent is the gardener.
Yep.
So what symbolizes the soil? Is the soil the home or the community environment? Is it the school? What is the soil that seed is planted?
I'd say both and in that scenario, both.
Okay.
And you can look at the soil from the standpoint of a family fabric. You can look at the soil of a school. In fact, school will often offer opportunities that maybe the home didn't offer, but it may also offer adversities or challenges that the home didn't offer. So you can see that child in either of those contexts.
So the seed is it's not bad. It's not a bad seed.
No. Absolutely not.
It has the same qualities and characteristics for growth, for potential, for development. All that is housed within a seed. Every child is a good child, has great potential.
Has the capacity.
Okay, has the capacity.
To
But
be
you
drawn
can
out.
take that great seed, that good seed, and plant it in a bad soil
Yes,
or
absolutely.
low-grade soil.
And then how would that impact upon what comes out of it?
So, wow. We could take a break right here because I just really broke something down. Effective communication. So we have the child as a seed. The child is a good child, is a good seed. We have to look at the type of environments that we plant these seeds in order to bring out the best.
Right.
Okay.
And when you say, and I like how you ended that, to bring out the best, because exposure is very critical in what they're being exposed to. So if I'm in a chaotic environment, I am going to start to relate more so to that chaos because that's my normal. Versus if I'm in an environment that's more consistent, there's a lot of nurturing and care going on, I'm going to relate to that more so.
But here's my question, and this I think is what a lot of parents who listen to this program say, well, I provided a good home for my child. So that's what we're talking about, nature versus nurture. And if you break that down, and we were authoritative parents, or we were authoritarian parents, or we were whatever the other parents are. I'm not understanding why my son went out here and stole a car and killed someone in the process. How do we help parents, resolve that you did the best that you could? And how important is it for, when you start talking about these environments, for the home environment, the school environment to work together to streamline values and supports in order to bring out the best in that child? So we got a lot to talk about on today's show, and if you want to join this conversation, you certainly can call 414-444-5250. When we come back on the other side of this break, we're going to be talking with Dr. Ben Rader about the positive parenting, a positive discipline perspective.
This is Jermaine reporting from Fresh Starts WBCM, Wisconsin Black Children Matter. Did you know that the number of black children in Milwaukee's foster care community continues to rise? According to the Department of Children and Families' most recent annual report, black children made up 68.2% of Milwaukee's foster kids. Many of these children are not only removed from their family and siblings, but are placed in families and communities that do not reflect or honor their race, culture, or heritage. Fresh Start is an agency that is committed to serving and advocating for black children. In order to meet the needs of this growing population, we need more black families in the Milwaukee area that love and celebrate black children. To become a licensed, culturally responsive foster parent with Fresh Start, you must be 21 years old, married or single with a stable income, clear several criminal background checks, and complete 36 hours of pre-licensing training. To learn more about other qualifications, call 414-351-1100. That's 414-351-1100. Again, this is Jermaine reporting from Fresh Start, WBCM, Wisconsin Black Children Matter.
Good afternoon. It's 3:22 in the afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today with your hosts, Jermaine Reed and Sean Roby. Our special guest in studio is Dr. Ben Rader from Sebastian Psychology Family Practice, and we're talking about supporting positive discipline in home, school, and community. And before the break, we were talking about this nature versus nurture concept, and for children and parents who are listening to this program today, and they're saying, you know what, my child is presenting with some behavior concerns. I have some concerns about my child's behavior, and unfortunately in many communities across the country, folks can't seem to get help, and particularly I'm talking to that single parent female population, mothers. Oftentimes they'll call us and say, well, you know what, where's the support at? How can I get help with my son and my daughter? Do they have to break the law? Do they have to hurt somebody? Do they have to steal a car? Do they have to beat up somebody? Do they have to rob somebody? Do they have to shoot somebody before we can get intervention services? And so you're talking about this perspective called positive discipline. So I'm hoping that with this information that you're showing today, that it can be helpful to these families who can't seem to get the community supports that they need in terms of rearing or raising their children. Can you explain to us from the psychological standpoint, or this perspective, what is positive discipline?
All right, great, super. Yeah, I certainly will. First of all, the term itself is used quite a bit. So positive discipline is kind of catchy, and there's any number of perspectives out there that have called themselves positive discipline over time. So I want to kind of cast this in a certain historical framework. What I'm talking about here and what we're going to be sharing on the 9th and the 10th is a perspective that's roughly 100 years old. And the story goes somewhat like this. There was a psychiatrist around the same time of Freud way back when in Vienna, and he was dealing with the same types of challenges in their time frame that we're talking about now. Parents that are having great problems with children, the behaviors that they're exhibiting are problematic, life-threatening or concerning or what have you. And the parents at the time, there was not a counseling service. Therapy wasn't in place yet. So there's nowhere to take these kids. Sometimes they'd go to the church, but the church may or may not have a perspective on this particular thing. And if they did, probably spiritual, not practical in nature. So families were kind of left to their own devices. Alfred Adler created this perspective where he started looking at children in context, in their neighborhoods, in their homes, in their schools, and he realized that their behavior, although mistaken from our standpoint, served some purpose from their standpoint. Okay. And what he became adept at is he was artful at reading the behavior of the youth. Now, he's had some strategies where he'd work with the family and work with the youth, but in the end, his goal was always the same: to help understand what was the function of the purpose of this behavior, given the context that it was going on in. And certainly, it was not working for the kid or for the family, or they wouldn't be there asking for help. But in some way, in a private way, perhaps it was working for the kid. So his job was to try to figure this out. He did this, generally speaking, for free. Although he was an MD, he had his own clinic. When he came to this guidance piece of things, he'd have people would come in the community. Often, maybe up to 150 people would come for what he'd have an open forum, and people would bring their challenges to Adler with their kid in tow, and he would work through it, usually in front of a live audience. So it was a very interesting model, very different than how we think of psychotherapy nowadays. But his perspective at that time, too, is that I can't get to everybody. So he had a format and a way of looking and teaching so that everybody could learn from it, because he believed it's not just this kid on the street. It's not just Jimmy on the street that's dealing with this thing. It's a whole bunch of other kids that are going through the same thing, and their families and their social workers and their teachers are all confused about it. So his job was really to impart some new perspective onto people and equip them at a time when there wasn't family therapists and there weren't social workers coming into the home the way that maybe we have now, to do something about this task and understand the problem new, so they're not just stuck in a stalemate situation, which is what I think most parents are experiencing when they're coming in asking a total stranger for help. They got to a point where they don't feel like they can make ground on their own. So the idea was really an instructive one. He wanted to teach people how to do this. And the perspective, although because it's based on the individual and that individual's relationship to their parent or their school or their community, it's always every person's motive and purpose is always a personal one, and it takes some time to get to. But the art of doing this collaborative kind of way that he did it, seems to have bore out some success over time and in different contexts. And we've kind of we've dressed it up. We've called it different things from time to time. Adler called it whatever he called it, and then he had a gentleman after him, Dreikers, who talked about the 4 goals of misbehavior. There's a group that looked at systemic training for effective parenting, the STEP program that was at one time the most recent reincarnation now through a woman, San Diego, who's kind of reorganized the precepts into what is called positive discipline. Now, this is Jane Nelson, Nelsen. Her first book probably came out in 1976 even. So even she's been around for a while, and I'm guessing we're at a point in time where it's going to get dressed up again, and we're going to start looking at those same principles again, but probably through a different title and a different name or whatever.
All right. We're going to take JT's call in a minute. But let me ask you this, because you talked about this perspective or this work starting in Vienna in 1920.
1920.
Okay, so about 100 years ago, it was
on
brought to
continent.
America on another continent, and that is really important. And another
Yes.
community, another culture,
Right.
another continent. how do we get these perspectives, and not just perspectives, but parent training programs? We see a lot, you know, or we see a lot of programs that are offered to parents whose children are in foster care. And if we be truthful, I mean, if we're going to be just totally honest, green beans and cornbread, totally
Yes.
honest, a lot of these programs are not working.
Right.
They're
Right.
not working. So when we talk about positive discipline, what is it about positive discipline that works in urban settings? That's
Right.
what's important for me.
Right, right. So a couple things to think on. First of all, one of the reasons I was hasty to say this is not a program earlier is because I do think that's one of the problems with programs is that they're created in a certain time and in a certain place. And what ends up happening is society changes, or the way that students interact with adults in general changes, that there's a different sense of authority or power or whatever that changes. So when you have something that looks like a manual approach, do this and then that's going to work, it stops working. What's different about positive discipline, and why I say is a philosophy, is really the spirit behind this is how is it that how is it that humans in their quest to live together, how is it that we can shine and succeed in life while also contributing to others?
Okay.
And the notion is wherever you're at, whatever community you have, you've got something that you can contribute.
Okay.
And also that any society that you're in, and this is also an important piece of the perspective, is erroneous in certain ways. There's things about it that you can't just go along with. So you've got to be active and discerning.
And I think it's really important, too, when you say positive discipline, and because, like you, I have a problem with that term, to be honest with you. Because it gives the impression that what type of discipline were we providing before? What type of parenting were we providing?
That's
There's
correct.
this thing in Wisconsin that's about to sweep the nation, actually. It's coming down from the federal government, but it's considered to be the reasonable and prudent parent standard.
Okay.
Which will allow foster parents to give their foster children permission to do age-appropriate activities that promote cognitive, emotional, physical,
Sure.
and behavioral growth. While the concept is pretty interesting, just thinking about the term reasonable and
Right.
prudent parents. So what were we doing before?
Right.
You know, before reasonable, prudent parenting
right.
came
Right,
along.
right,
Were we
right.
unreasonable
Right.
and were we unwise? Or you know, and I think we have to be careful because when you go into certain communities, you say, okay, we're going to teach you about positive development. It can be offensive.
Yes.
JT, you're listening to Fresh Start Today. JT,
Yes, sir.
how are you doing this afternoon?
All right, Mr. Jermaine. Reed, how you doing, sir?
Doing great. So glad to hear your voice. You got a question or comment for Dr. Ben Rader about this positive discipline?
Yes, sir. And first of all, before I continue, I'd just like to say good afternoon to the distinguished gentleman that you have there as your guest today. And good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Jermaine,
Yes, sir.
you're absolutely right, man. What is positive discipline? To me, at my age, I'm 63, Vietnam veteran, 63 years old. When I was growing up, raised by my grandmother, positive discipline to me was that they loved me. Back in those days when families had jobs, they can go to work at the factories and stuff, and they work hard. If you got in trouble, you got your butt whooped. I didn't say spank, you got it whooped if you got in trouble, okay? But you knew your parents loved you. So you took that whooping, and you did better in your life. But today, you had like 3 generations removed, and you have babies having babies and stuff like that. We had social agencies like you was referring to, Jermaine, earlier. We had SBC. We had CYB back in those days. And for a minute, they was working real good in our community in an urban setting. Only thing happened with that, they didn't get any support from the state. So now you got one gone and you got one still here almost. But back in those days, they used to teach the young parents how to take care of your child, how to raise your child and stuff like that, because they had a place to go through too with the social agencies. But social, again, excuse me for reiterating, but the social agencies is out here trying to help us people in urban setting in our community. They're not there anymore. So what's going to happen now? I don't know. All I can say respectfully is whatever agencies we have left, we need to make sure they get some support to help these families, babies helping babies and stuff like that, to teach them how to teach their kids to have moral values and respect and stuff like that. I know I'm reaching for that, but the fact is there's no such thing as positive raising your kids or anything anymore, you know, because now people trying so hard, just trying to keep something to eat on the table, to pay their rent, buy them some clothes and stuff like that, and keep some food in the house. And the Republicans made sure that was taken away. So I don't know where we're going to go from here, Jermaine.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying, sir. And gentlemen, I thank God that you're there. Maybe you can shed some light on that for me. But what I'm trying to say, when we did have social agencies in our community that was trying to help, they were doing a great job, but they just didn't get no resources to continue to do that. So where do we go from here? I don't know, but we shouldn't give up trying. We have to keep on going, Jermaine. And gentlemen, thank you so much, and thank you, Jermaine.
Hey, thank you, JT, for those words of wisdom and your insight. You know, I think JT raised some very valid points, particularly around that, you know, we have families who are caught up in the system. They're stuck in the system for a number of reasons. And we have all these criterias and we have standards that we need for these families to meet, you know, particularly in foster care in terms of reunification, a court order condition. Sometimes it's going to a parent training class or parenting class to therapy, to go identify or secure a job and suitable housing. And so while we're talking about positive discipline being important or, you know, facilitating, managing relationships that are healthy and beneficial to all parties involved, the reality is, like I believe what JT was saying, is that there are some very pressing needs that folks have on their agenda. Where are we going to sleep tonight?
Right.
What are we going to eat? I have bills I need to pay. I got to pay this electric bill. How do we get families and parents to balance that, you know, in their parenting? Because all of that is really important.
Right.
You know,
right.
I'm just trying to balance that.
Right. And you have the other extreme then, too, is that you have individuals that I think are caught up in the day-to-day and have to be just to keep things going. And they're doing it by themselves or whatever. And then the other thing that happens, the other extreme that happens, is you have behaviors that get so out of hand that it sabotages the parent's attempt to make it work at the day-to-day. They're getting those calls from the school.
Yeah.
And they have to stop what they're doing, and their whole lifestyle then ends up one way or the other around this kid who's moving intentionally in the wrong direction. You know, so almost deliberately so. It seems, you know, that the mother knows that the kid knows better, and everybody else seems to suggest maybe she didn't teach him right. She didn't say it right, and that's why he's going in the wrong direction. But she knows different, and yet she's got to stop her job. She has to go and deal with, for the fathers that are out there.
I'm sorry, and I appreciate you saying that, because not all single-parent mothers or single-parent fathers are bad parents. Sometimes kids, because you can rear a child up a particular way that you find appropriate for that child,
right.
But then once and I think you spoke about this earlier when you're talking about these different contexts, because you have the school aspect, you have the bus stop, you have the neighborhood, you have even at home or going to relative homes, you have all these outside influences which look totally different than they did 50 years or 75 or 100 years ago.
Right.
Because now we have social media,
Yes.
and even in the everyday fabric of American life, our society is very hypersexualized and hyper-aggressive. And so now if you have all these factors in this one big pot, and it's constantly stirring and stirring, once that child leaves your home, they ultimately have to make a choice.
Yes.
And that choice is critical. And your hope is that everything that you've instilled in this child from very, very early on, up until 12, 13, 17 years old, they make the right choices ultimately.
Right.
But it doesn't always work like that.
And now we're getting some traction, because I mean, this is kind of where I think, although it's I think a different set of social circumstances, this is the similarity is that at one point we realize that we are in a society that maybe we ourselves aren't prepared for. That the children now are facing circumstances that are maybe substantively different
Because
than even what we dealt with.
Absolutely, because a parent now may not
So
understand
can you
social
parent
media.
children the same way that my grandmother, my great-grandmother parented? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Can you, given that society is changed,
What's
soil
what's
has
fascinating is that in some cases I'll say yes, because
Okay.
in some cases you have some kids who maybe they're what you did and what your folks did or whatever, it might work with 3 of the 4 kids that you've got.
changed. Okay.
But that
But how many
other
kids
kid,
you got?
yeah,
Right.
you got the 4th kid,
Okay.
and
Fourth
he, it's not working for him, and the proof's in the pudding. So my point is, once he's out there, and it shouldn't be an indictment against an individual, but what you have to be able to say to someone is this working or isn't working, and that's a parent's decision. I mean, that's somebody else's decision for the most part. Is this working or isn't it working? If I don't know what else to do, then what do I do? So,
Okay.
So the idea. I want to pause on the word discipline for a second. If
Okay.
we can.
Wait. Yeah. Let's talk.
And
about
the notion, I think, when we're hearing that term, one of the problems that I have with it was I actually addressed in the original by the author's original use of the term. Although we use it differently, discipline we tend to think of as an external thing onto us, but the root of the word discipline is disciple, and a disciple
teach.
follows a model. So the notion is
a
how
model
do
or
you get
perspective.
a guideline, a
Okay.
set of values
Okay.
that's
Go.
internalized. Think about when we say I'm being disciplined now. I'm on my exercise kick. We weren't physically hitting ourselves to keep us from doing that. It means that we are able to walk away from the sweets and towards the fruit, and we're feeling this. And they say, "Oh, you're so disciplined," and that's the nation. That is what an individual lacks who goes out and steals a car for a weekend joyride. Is that there's something inside of him that was craving that thing, but
That's
there
right.
wasn't a counterweight within that individual. Now the parent did not take the vehicle.
Right.
The parent did not give a condoning of that or say that was all right. In fact, the parent made it very clear not to do it. So something curious had in that individual where they have lost the sense in that moment of internal discipline, and internal discipline really in this case being something that is also socially oriented. How can any one of us really guide ourselves in society in a healthy way without being concerned with the impact that it's having on others? And that's exactly what's happening with our youth when they go off in a wrongful direction.
So, again, just for those folks who are listening, what is positive discipline, the positive discipline perspective, and what you all are going to be teaching or sharing with the community?
Great. So what we're going to be looking at are some strategies that are really designed to take the power that the parent has and holds, and that we're granted when the child first comes, or for this matter, the teacher, the social worker. In fact, our perspective, positive discipline in this scenario has actually been implemented in schools. You mentioned urban population. A school in Sacramento that made use of positive discipline techniques brought their suspensions down. Is about 80% African American, 20-ish% Hispanic, and a couple Caucasian kids. But they brought their suspension rate down from 60 one year to 54 the next to 4 the following year. And the ideas that they really had are similar to what Adler originally talked about. The notion is the idea of a family meeting. People familiar with this idea? The idea that you're going to actually take a break in time and we're going to figure out what the heck is going on, and you're identifying in that framework what are some of the problems. You can do this in a classroom also. What are the problems that we're dealing with in the classroom? And one of the things they try to get away from systems of rewards and punishment, because that's an external thing.
Well,
I'm
it's
tricky.
glad you brought that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So getting this system of rewards and punishment doesn't work. Seriously. I mean, beans, greens, cornbread with some yams.
Right.
Does that work?
It doesn't work.
Because you got to help me. I need you to diagnose me right here.
Yes.
Because I'm working in child welfare, and we often hear folks talking about, encouraging foster parents
Right.
to institute a system of rewards
and punishment. Yes. Right.
Why doesn't that system, from your perspective, why doesn't it
Well,
work?
the limits with the system of reward and punishment is it may work for a period of time, and I think the initial aspect is it does work when it's really working at that point of
In that moment.
I'm going to get X amount of time for for doing something good on the Xbox, or I'm going to get X amount of money for washing the dishes. What happens, though, when you run out of carrots? When you no longer have the financial resources that you can give. And now this is really one of the challenging issues is that think about the resources, the limited resources, but the resources nonetheless that foster parents have versus the families from which these individuals come from. I've been on teams where they say, let's get this kid an Xbox if he goes to school the rest of the year. Well, guess what?
Biological family may not be in that
Biological
position.
family can't
Those
afford a
Nikes,
television.
Exactly.
So the idea is, how many times you've had it where your children, you say, hey, pick up everybody. Let's clean up our spot. And if your children need to be incentivized to do that, you're in trouble.
Wow.
Because that individual is going to have to at some point go out there and contribute.
I love this because it really brings into perspective what really is going on. Because I think that the child welfare community is an incentivized community, from adoptions to placement to everything is incentivized, and even how we parent those children in this model, in this community, and not taking into consideration that foster care should be a temporary placement. So if we're going to take those children, put them back in their families of origin.
Now they're used to flat screen TVs and this notion of their own space.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic.
And so it does not produce long-term.
It will not. In fact, what we know, I'm also a psychologist. So in psychology, what we've kind of found is that you can incentivize, for instance, piano playing. And the kids that are getting the little cookie for playing pianos, they're going to play that piano more often than the other kids. But what happens when you take away those cookies? You have crippled Mozart. Because now the children that used to do this for fun, that they like to do it, stop doing it.
Okay.
So if you compare two groups, the one that were incentivized to play the piano and those that weren't, you compare the two over the long haul. When the incentive goes away, the ones who used to play for fun now won't play if they don't get a cookie.
So what's the alternative to rewards and punishment?
So the alternative is that you really have more of a collegial mindset. You come together and you say, the basic reward in society is this, that I can belong, that I've got a place. And that's what these kids are hungry for. That's what these children need, a place that's stable. This is what we do in terms of our chores. Everybody pick a chore and do it. What do you want to do to help out? And what's your role in this? And I've noticed that you're not wanting to help out. Tell me about that. Where are you at with that? Why are you not wanting to help out like everybody else?
And I think that collective aspect, because I've seen teachers many times when it's time to go outside or it's time to play kickball and one kid doesn't go, then they'll say, all right, everybody, nobody can go outside until we're all
now
on the
everybody's
same page.
being punished, and this kid's feeling kind of on the spot.
Right.
So moving along, letting the game happen as naturally as possible, and then realizing there's something up with Jimmy.
Right.
And let's go over and let's check in on him and to see what's going on with this. Now the kid may have asthma. The kid may feel embarrassed about how bad he does. He might not know how to play the game, so you have to tell him what the game is. And meanwhile, now everybody's angry at this kid.
That's me,
because they're not playing.
That was me.
Right.
So there's four different parenting styles: the authoritarian parenting style, the authoritative parenting style, permissive parenting style, uninvolved parenting style. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those parenting styles? Which parenting style, or do all of them work well with the positive discipline perspective?
Yes, absolutely. What positive discipline is really about, and it was before the term, but this is where a lot of the theory came from, was directly from Adler himself, and it would have been the authoritative. The idea is a democratic mindset, that you are not just a free-for-all. The kid doesn't decide what we're going to eat for dinner 5 days a week. That's not what a kid. That's too much power for a kid to have. You're this president or the CEO. You've got a certain role that you're supposed to play, and you put that framework out. However, they're a voting member. They're a part of society, and if we can get them engaged and you can get them discussing, and if you can get a kid, very often I've seen families. You have the kid set the punishment and the circumstances, and you say, what is it that you, if we don't do this, that, and the other thing, what should be the consequence? And the consequence, I think, is a better word than, or even now, Jay Nelson says solution. What's the solution to this problem? You've been up too late, and we want the home in at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the summer. What's our solution to getting you in? So the mindset's a little bit different.
Right, and I think that's more of the dynamic of the positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement versus rewards and punishments.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that, but in this case, it's an intrinsic reward, and the idea is I am feeling like I've got some say in this matter. That's authoritative. Authoritarian, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to do it.
Because I said so.
My way,
Because
highway,
I said so, yeah.
or no
yeah.
way.
And the challenge with that is very simple, and that is we're just talking about child protective services. Now we have a society where a parent cannot be a parent. It could be that a parent's authority is taken away. Think about church. It's a similar dynamic that we have now. One time, you were brought up in a certain community. Maybe you're Baptist. Maybe you're. I was brought up in a community that was half Catholic and half Lutheran. And I kid you not, the Catholics went to Piggly Wiggly. The Lutherans went to Food Lane. And it was like there was like this.
We
there's
Baptists.
this idea,
We went to Gallus.
Baptist Gallus. That's right. But the idea is
the corner store.
those are the only options. My point is that you're in the church, and now there's different. There's people that aren't in spirituality at all. So we have a society now that doesn't have a dominant king-like or queen-like leader, and the possibility of the leader can be taken away.
You know, I'm looking at these two different type of style, and I hate that their words are so closely tied.
I know,
yes. Authoritarian, and then authoritative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you said the authoritative is the more democratic style, you know, and that's where parents establish rules and guidelines that their children are expected to follow.
Yes.
However, they're more democratic. There is some choice. There is, you know, how do you feel? We're going to vote on this.
Open to negotiation.
Open to negotiation, where the authoritarian parenting style is one where the parent establishes strict rules. Failure to follow such rules usually result in what this author said, punishment. Authoritarian parents fail to explain the reason behind these rules. If asked to explain, the parent might simply say, "It's because I said so. This is my
Right,
house."
yes.
Now I just, you know, this beans, greens, cornbread. Now,
Yes.
you know, when I came up in a home that was authoritarian. It can present problems that if I or somebody called the authorities on my authoritarian mother or father,
Yes.
and that person who came out to assess our situation came from a permissive parenting home model.
Different upbringing.
Right.
You got it.
But you're saying that there's something wrong with saying because I said so, and I think for most of us that's probably in this room here, we didn't have a democracy in
Right.
our home.
Right.
And how bad was that not to be able to say, well, I don't feel that you're being fair, Mom. You know, that could have some different type of
I
consequences.
think most of the time it didn't have bad
Okay.
consequences. I think most of the time what happens is that when we get to a point in the challenge with authoritarian is that at some point you never can lead yourself. That's the notion
Okay.
that you always need to be obedient
Got it.
unto somebody who can't think for yourself. And life does not allow us the option to have somebody tell me what to do when I'm an adult. However, now the idea is that but I'm going to follow this. I'm going to say that most of these parenting styles, for most children, are going to be all right. And we have all sorts of children that are brought up in any one of these that turn out
Okay.
just fine.
Just fine.
The challenge is when you run up into a situation where the kid does find now there's an exit strategy. Now I know that there's another authority I can go to. Now that society's organized different, and I can
Well, let me-
and whatever it is that's happened pragmatically, then because we're in a democratic-ish society, and we have.
Ish. I'm glad you said
that's
ish.
Right. That's right.
Yes.
And the more democratic-ish we are, the more the authoritative is likely to work out. The more authoritarian of a society we are, the more authoritarian that's going to be. So as society's morphed and changed.
Well, let me say something, because we talked about two of the parenting style, but there's two others. One is permissive parenting,
yes.
and that's sometimes referred to as the indulgent parents.
Yes.
They have very few demands that they make of their children. These parents rarely discipline their children because they have relatively low expectations of maturity and self-control. According to Baumrind, permissive parents are more responsive than they are demanding. They are non-traditional and very lenient. I think about those free, what you call free roam parents, or they allow their children. What do you call it? The free. These children just roam.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
forget what
that's
you
right,
call them,
that's
but
right,
there's
that's
really no
right.
structure. The kids, if they want to go to school today, they can go to school. If they don't, if they want to go to school at 11 o'clock, they
Yeah.
can. You know,
Stay up all
There's
night.
if they want to go to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's
Right.
fine. You know, when you get out of my house, see.
Yes. Yeah.
And that goes back to the authoritarian.
See, and permissive parents are generally nurturing and communicating with their children, often take on the status of a friend more than a
Versus-
parent.
yeah.
Now,
This
I
is
can say from
dangerous too,
African American community in general, from the time when we grew up, our parents' goal was not to be our friend.
Right.
And they
right.
want to make it very clear what your role is, what my role is, where the rules are, where the
Right.
boundaries. And then, too, I think we have to look at culture and the experiences of people in terms of what contributes
Right,
to.
right.
You know,
Picture.
Right.
we collectively as a people, as an African people, were controlled
Yes.
in this environment. We're
Yes.
still controlled in subliminal ways.
Yes.
The society. Institutional structural racism still exists. Those are means of
Right.
controlling
Right.
certain
Right.
populations. So depending on where you come from and the folks you are connected to could, I think, also influence
Yeah.
the type of parenting.
Yeah,
You know,
and
realistically,
I've
so
got, now I've got the perspective on this. You
Sure.
touched on permissive, so I want to go there, and
talk
then
there.
I'm going to follow somewhere else you were saying and go. Permissive is dangerous, and the idea is, from my standpoint, this might be what we're seeing more of. And as people get more research or understanding about conditions or needs or whatever, often, and that maybe, and it's not just in the African American community,
I
the
understand.
white community was authoritarian. I mean, this is where the model of king or whatever really
Yeah.
came from Europe, and the notion in the United States, and I'd say most of the communities probably that where I was brought up, similar as well. However, the permissive is dangerous nowadays because I think that we really do need, these children do need guidance. Because of what's out there, we need something to follow that's going to give us a little bit more. And to have a friend, you can have 1,000 friends in society, and a lot of times permissive parents are afraid that no one's going to like their kids, so they become the kid's friend. But now nobody likes the kid because the parent's the only friend they have. They're socializing with the parents.
The
and
whole
kid.
world evolved around their parents
so
and
the
the
kid,
yeah.
and that there needs to be a space, and I'd say the authoritative parents would agree on that. A parent's role is different than a friend. Now, what you brought up is an interesting point. The idea is America is changing, and the notion that at one time speaking out, and that was something big in my family. That was
we couldn't speak out.
Was celebrated. A family where the idea, and this is probably my more immediate upbringing of my folks or whatever, teaching you to assert yourself or whatever. However, the broader framework in our culture within the last century to speak out and be African American was life-threatening. So the notion that you could, they're still threatening, yes, right. So the notion that you could get yourself into some serious hot water, the parent doing the authoritarian thing was doing the best thing possible for the kid to keep them safe and to keep them nearby.
And
That's
So-
what you're speaking of.
Right, and we
Right,
have about
right.
4 minutes left of this program, so I really want to be able to
man.
get to the event that's coming up on June 9th and 10th and which audience you all are targeting. But I'm glad you brought in how that based on what our experience has been in America.
Yes.
Why
Undoubtedly.
some parents parent the way they parent, why they keep their children close by.
Yes.
Why, no, you don't need to talk. You can't speak out against authority because even as a 42-year-old African-American male, I was at a government meeting last
Right.
Friday and
Right.
spoke out
Right.
and saw what I believe would be some immediate retaliation
Yes.
today
Yes,
in my
I
office.
believe that. I
so,
believe that.
so there's still these messages
Right.
that's being sent that, this is your place, this is your spot, and the government in America, you're right, is authoritarian. That's what that king is. We are in control. We control people. But that's neither here nor there. It's 3:57 in the afternoon, and we want to talk about, for the last 2 minutes, Dr. Ben Radar from Sebastian Psychology Family Practice.
Yes.
What's this event that's coming up
Okay,
June 9th and 10th?
so what we're going to get at, some of the themes we're talking about today are going to be put into a little bit more real-world and understandable practices. The first the spirit of this is going to be how to understand these principles and how they've been applied in the past and how they're being applied now, and then how to convey them to the families that we're working with. So this is really kind of catering to professionals or professional foster parents, people who are doing this from the standpoint of, I want to help out guiding children and youth in a new way, and I want to do it in a way that's not going to try to replace the parent. I want to be respectful to the needs
Right,
and the rights
right.
of the family, the community.
That's important.
So we're going to have a 2-day thing. It's going to be held at All Saints Cathedral, which is on Juneau, downtown Avenue, downtown Milwaukee. And first day is going to be about understanding the perspective of positive discipline and really the Adlerian history in general, how they see and think about this. And then the second day is how to translate that into action for the families that we're serving, so that they can kind of benefit from this perspective as well. It's going to be worth 14 continuing education credits for social workers, psychologists, other professionals, and $125 for the 2 days. at a pretty much half the rate of what it could be offered in other places. Where
So a lot of folks who are working in this field, they can go to their
This is it.
employers. Okay. And so
Please
where
do,
can they
yeah.
call? Where can they call?
So they can contact me at MASL
Okay.
community@gmail.com, and I'll send you an electronic flyer we have right here. Or you can call the clinic, and you can suppose you could 414-247-0801.
So that's 414-247-0801.
Yep.
And ask about the Heart of a Child guidance workshop or training that's going to be going on June 9th, June 10th. Hope you all can make it. Psychologists, therapists, parent coaches, foster care agencies, educators, and guidance counselor. Thank you for tuning in to Fresh Start today. Enjoy the weather. Be well. Be safe. Until next week.